For 75 years, Southwest Power Pool has helped our members work together to keep the lights on. Our mission is to ensure the reliable supply of power, adequate transmission infrastructure, and competitive wholesale electricity prices in our region. SPP today is a regional transmission organization representing nearly 100 member companies. Our diverse membership spans 14 states, and our footprint covers a 575,000 square mile region with over 60,000 miles of transmission lines.
SPP is primarily a relationship-based organization, and we have been for 75 years. The things that we've accomplished over the years and the things yet to be accomplished will be primarily based on the strength of the relationships between our members and between our members and our staff.
On March 1st, 2014, SPP went live with its most ambitious project to date, the Integrated Marketplace, which built upon SPP's previous markets.
The Integrated Marketplace allows SPP customers to take advantage of the diverse energy resources. The Integrated Marketplace has provided approximately $1 billion in net savings to the SPP region and its customers.
In 2009, SPP's region had grown significantly with the addition of several Nebraska utilities to its membership roster. In 2015, the SPP footprint would nearly double again when the integrated systems joined SPP's RTO.
The addition of Western Area Power Administration, Basin Electric, and Heartland Consumer Power District brought about 5,000 megawatts of peak demand and 9,500 miles of transmission infrastructure into the SPP region.
The decisions that the utilities in Nebraska and the Dakotas have made have just put an emphasis point on what makes SPP different. In terms of markets, in terms of reliability, they could have become members of different organization and gotten almost the same thing. The reason they made the decision to become part of SPP was the way the governance structure works and the culture of the organization, which is all about how you can serve better.
Today, SPP serves a population of nearly 18 million people in a region that stretches from the Canadian border in the north to Louisiana in the south and as far west as New Mexico and Montana. SPP provides tremendous value to that region. SPP members receive net benefits of more than $1.4 billion annually at a benefit-to-cost ratio of more than 10 to 1. And SPP provides a service that is critical to our nation. From 2005 to 2010, SPP undertook several vital initiatives to meet transmission planning needs. The SPP Transmission Expansion Plan, the Balanced Portfolio, the Synergistic Planning Project, Priority Projects, the near-term 10-year and 20-year integrated transmission planning processes, and the innovative Highway-Byway Cost Allocation Plan.
Transmission expansion planning is one of our core functions, and it provides tremendous value. For example, we recently found that transmission investment in our region made as a result of our planning efforts provides a benefit-to-cost ratio of 3.5 to 1. That means for every dollar that our members invest in improving the transmission system, on average, our ratepayers can expect to receive $3.5 of benefits.
In 2016, SPP is still making history. In the first quarter of 2016 alone, the organization lowered its reserve margin, completed its first competitively bid transmission owner selection process, and expanded its board. What does the future hold for SPP? New technologies and regulations will pose challenges and opportunities our experts cannot yet predict. But after 75 years, one thing is certain. The relationships SPP has forged with its members and stakeholders will always position the company to adapt, reach consensus, and move forward.
We think of ourselves as providing electricity, and I think that we're going to have to change that view in the future. What OG&E with the SPP provides is reliability.
Since 11 companies joined together in 1941, our relationships have seen SPP through a multitude of changes. Those relationships will carry SPP forward together for another 75 years. We are Southwest Power Pool, helping our members work together to keep the lights on today and in the future.
Well, good morning. Good morning. Thank you very much. As Paul started a process of having a dialogue, I hope to continue that. Obviously, with as many people who are in the room, it's going to be kind of a one-way dialogue as I'm up here on the stage. But I and others of our staff will be here through about mid-afternoon, and I really encourage you to find us and continue that dialogue. My hope is to share in the next several minutes a little bit of more of our history than what you saw in the video. And Kurt, wonderful job that your staff did in editing down a 20-minute video from our 75th anniversary last year to what you saw. But I'll add a little bit more color to that history and where we are today. And then I'm going to finish with my view in the crystal ball about at least what Nick Brown sees in that vision. So you heard our mission statement, helping our members work together to keep the lights on today and in the future. There are really three different components of this mission statement that was put together back in the early 90s. Helping our members work together. It is not our job to do it for you. It is certainly not our job to do it to you. It is our job to facilitate discussion among our very diverse membership and helping the membership determine what is in its collective best interest. Facilitation is a key function of our staff. And when we say we are a member-driven organization, we mean it. To keep the lights on. Reliability is job one. And as you heard in the video, wholesale energy markets are a primary function that we provide. But we're not about the wholesale markets. We're about bulk electric system reliability and keeping the lights on. Every one of our market rules were designed to accomplish that mission in the most effective way and reliable way possible. So it's not about the markets, it's about reliability. The markets are a means to that end. And then the last part of our mission statement, and particularly important for us as staff today and in the future. Obviously, we manage the bulk electric system across all our parts of 14 states. Real time. Our operators look at long term as next week's forecast. And they don't spend that much time on next week's forecast, maybe tomorrow's forecast. And then in real-time operation, they're never looking past the end of their nose. Second by second, monitoring in real time the bulk electric network. On the flip side, we are the planning authority for our footprint. Transmission planning is such an extraordinarily important part of our job, such that as we look 10 years into the future, because of the long lead times that Paul talked about, that when we get to that point 10 years into the future, that our real-time operators have a system that they can, in fact, reliably operate in real time. So again, three parts: helping our members work together to keep the lights on today and in the future. So at a glance, we are located in Little Rock, Arkansas. We have just over 600 employees, and that number is stabilizing somewhat. Most of our jobs are fairly high-tech. IT and engineering are primary jobs for us. We are one of the largest engineering employers in the state of Arkansas. We are 24/7 shop and have been since 1997, so we never close, similar to your operations folks. And we have huge redundancy in the performance of our function. So legally, what are we? We are a nonprofit corporation in the state of Arkansas. We charge only what it costs our customers to perform the services that they ask us to perform. We are a FERC-regulated, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission regulated public utility under the Federal Power Act. But obviously our focus is only at the wholesale level. And currently we are a regional entity under the auspices of the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, serving as a compliance enforcement authority, though the decision to cease that particular function and focus more on our regional transmission organization functions was made earlier this year, and we will be ceasing that particular function throughout next year. So you saw the footprint, all are parts of 14 states, very, very diverse, and the growth. Here's what it's all about. Over 546,000 square miles of service territory, very rural in our overall footprint, less than 18 million people across all our parts of 14 states. Generating plants, 790 generating plants that function in our market, nearly 5,000 substations. And my son looked at this many years back, 30 years ago when he first visited our office, and he looked at that, he said, "Well, Dad, that just looks like a mess." And I said, "Well, son, it may look that way, but it's our job to ensure that that mess, highly interconnected, highly interdependent network functions in the most reliable and efficient way possible." So a map of all of the ISOs and RTOs in the U.S. 3 are within the confines of a single state. 4 others in the U.S. are multi-state. We are certainly one of those. So our major services, reliability coordination. We are the air traffic controller, if you will, similar to air traffic control that doesn't own the airplanes or the airports, but functions to ensure that everything operates in a reliable fashion. Similarly, we don't own the generating plants or the transmission facilities, but we do work very diligently to ensure the safe and reliable operation. We are the balancing authority for the entire footprint. I'll talk more about that in a few moments. We're the sales agent for transmission service in the footprint. We provide one-stop shopping across our entire footprint. Prior to implementation of our regional tariff in 1998, just to get across then are all our parts of 8-state footprint for transmission service. Take an example, moving energy from Southwestern Public Service in the Panhandle of Texas to Mississippi. Market participants would have to contact as many as 5 individual transmission owning members and arrange for transmission service under 5 different sets of rates, terms, and conditions. Each of those owners had different tariffs, and it would take often hours, if not a day or more, to arrange point-to-point transmission service across our footprint. All the negotiation, again, different rates, terms, and conditions. Imagine crossing a state boundary driving, and the driving rules change as you cross that boundary. So with the implementation of that region-wide transmission service, one-stop shopping, make one phone call, if you will, and sometimes that was the case, although it's more automated than that today. But being able to arrange for wholesale transmission service in one place under one set of rates, terms, and conditions made the wholesale marketplace just take off. Market operations, obviously we do operate the wholesale market, the day-ahead market, financial transmission rights markets, and we can talk more about that as we go on. I already mentioned the transmission planning function, and the standard setting and compliance enforcement is part of our responsibilities as a NERC regional entity. Those will come off this slide more than likely by mid next year. So we will be focusing only on our responsibilities as a regional transmission organization. We have 95 members and a high degree of diversity of those memberships. As you can see, there are 20 cooperatives, G&T cooperatives, 16 investor-owned utilities, independent power producers, marketers, municipals, independent transmission companies, state agencies, and a federal agency. Very, very diverse membership. So when I talk about facilitation being one of the key services that our staff provides, and you can understand why. With a geographic diversity of 14 states, a membership that's that diverse, we exercise our independence through the diversity of that membership. So I'll talk a little bit about a few milestones. I mentioned earlier we were formed in 1941, and that was part of the war effort. At that point in time, most of our initial members were not electrically interconnected. They operated in isolated small grids. And because of the war effort and the need for aluminum for the construction of aircraft, a decision was made by the then War Department to construct aluminum plants right on top of the raw deposit, bauxite. Arkansas happened to be home to the largest bauxite deposit in the U.S., and as such, the design and focus was constructing an aluminum plant right there in central Arkansas. The challenge was this. The demand, electrical demand from that plant was 120 megawatts, and the maximum generating capacity in the state of Arkansas at the time was less than 100 megawatts. So 11 members pooled their generation resources and their construction capabilities. They built high voltage transmission, which at the time was 115 kV, to interconnect and reliably serve that aluminum plant throughout the war. Extraordinary learning experience for the members. And because of what they learned through that process, even at the end of the war, and turning over of that plant to private ownership, the organization was maintained and it has evolved ever since. So very important. 1980, we implemented a telecommunications network. Prior to that time, all the coordination was done by phone. I would laugh, and most of you would laugh at the technology of that telecommunications network today, but at the time it was cutting edge. In '91, we implemented operating reserve sharing, such that when one of our members lost a generating unit, they automatically could depend on each other for the replacement of that energy until longer term arrangements could be made. That, quite frankly, was very, very cutting edge in the central part of the U.S. at the time. So we were sharing operating reserve and interstate commerce. Let me spend a moment on the next point. 1994, incorporated as a nonprofit. Now, a lot of people look at that and they say, well, what do you mean, Nick? You incorporated in 1994. You incorporated in 94, you were formed in 41, 53 years later, before you legally existed. How did that happen? Again, In 91, we were sharing operating reserve in interstate commerce, and yet we didn't legally exist. And my answer to that is very, very simple, and you all know the answer because you depend on it as well. Never, ever underestimate the value of a relationship. Don't do it. Extraordinarily powerful stuff. In 97, we did implement reliability coordination, the air traffic control function. Primary reason for that is with the passage of the Energy Policy Act of 1992 and the influx of new entrants into wholesale market activity, the ability to understand and have the big picture just wasn't there. Everyone understood what was going on in their footprint, at least in terms of their operational decisions. Unfortunately, because of loop flow from transactions of service that was being sold by their neighbor, they couldn't understand the flows on their own network. It was horrid, and I will tell you, it was a scary time in our footprint to sit and watch what was going on a daily basis, and our operators not being able to understand why the flows on their systems were what they were. So in 97, we implemented regional reliability coordination so that we could unwind the system in a coordinated basis and have somebody independent of the market activity in charge of getting that competitively sensitive information and then being able to curtail transactions to maintain reliable operation. I will tell you, that was a scary time. We couldn't implement that service quick enough. So, other milestones, and I'll hit these fairly quickly. In 98, we implemented the very first tariff, and I would like to think that that tariff was as robust as our tariff is today, but it was not. It was a regional tariff, but it only provided for non-firm transmission service and short-term firm point-to-point, less than a year. 2 years later, we evolved and implemented long-term firm point-to-point, and 18 months after that, region-wide network transmission service. We can go further down, and we launched our EIS market in 2007, and obviously those market rules are part of our regional tariff. Today, that tariff is over 7,500 pages of rates, terms, and conditions that govern how we do what we do. You saw in the video that in 2009, we added the Nebraska entities to our footprint, a wonderful expansion. 2010, we approved a highway-byway cost allocation. For the first time, we were able to know how to pay on a region-wide basis for bulk transmission that serves the entire region. So I'll tell you a little bit of story about that. We were recognized, and you see 2004 as a regional transmission organization. That is what made us a public utility under the Federal Power Act. At that point in time, when we were recognized by FERC in that manner, one of my then board members, Trudy Harper from Tenaska, many of you may know her, came up to me and said, well, Nick, the end of last year, you were elected as president of CEO that is now a regional transmission organization. Regional transmission organization. And she leaned up, put her hand on my shoulder, and she said, so where's the transmission? And, you know, it was a very good point, because for decades we had not built transmission. We did the planning studies, and we'd say, yep, that looks really good, and then we'd put those studies on the shelf, and they would collect dust. And the primary reason nobody was building transmission is that we didn't know how to pay for it on a region-wide basis when the utilization was being made on a region-wide basis. So I will tell you that cost allocation decision was extraordinarily important to take us to where we are today. And a few more. In 2012, a little more than 5.5 years ago, we moved into our corporate center. And Paul, thanks for the tours of your facility, wonderful facility last night when our staff members were on that tour. We just kept moving from area to area and go, wow, this just looks so familiar. And I will tell you, you will really enjoy the benefits of that facility, you and your employees. I can assure you, you will see improvements in efficiency. And we didn't match your ability to pull that off 12% under budget. We were just shy of budget. And I did win a wonderful bet with the chair of our finance committee, being able to do that, and he lost one of his prize bottles of wine in that bet, but we didn't reach 12% under. 14, the integrated marketplace and consolidation of all the balancing authorities in our footprint, and then in 2015, the integrated systems joined SPP. And thank you for that. It has been a wonderful, wonderful experience for all of our membership. So, I've talked about the growth and responsibilities. On this chart shows a combination of any number of things, number of transactions under the tariff, number of employees, and amount of dollars settled within the marketplace. And we exceeded $20 billion last year. Big operation. So with that, obviously our expenses have gone up. Paul spent time talking to you about their cost, and I felt it appropriate to talk to you about our cost. Again, we only charge you what it costs to perform the service, so there's a lot of attention paid to our budgeting process, and are we operating as efficiently as we can. So you can see how our rate has grown over the years, but here's the good news. The good news is we actually have a benefit to cost ratio of greater than 11 to 1. The video said 10 to 1. Current number is greater than 11 to 1. And here's what I will promise you, that our focus on our cost will always be to make that ratio go up, not down. So if our costs go up, I promise you that our goal will be, the only reason those costs are going up is because the value is going up, that benefit to cost ratio is going up. Now, let me tell you about where that number comes from. Our members told us how to calculate that number. Our staff didn't. I mean, our staff certainly worked with our members in determining how to make that calculation. When I looked at it, I kind of complained because I'm going, that's just way too conservative. There's certainly more value that we're creating than what you're calculating. Here's the deal. We wanted a number that we could go in front of any group of people like yourselves or state regulators or the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission and not have anyone question the results. So it's very conservatively calculated, but it's 11 to 1 benefit to cost ratio. So market, 185 participants, while we only have 95 members. Again, we are public utilities, so we have eligible customers that are not required to be members of the organization. Already mentioned 790 generating resources and 20 billion settled. So the last note, wind penetration record, 54.22% in March of this year. That means 54.22% of the energy being consumed in all or parts of 14 states was being produced by wind energy. If you had asked me 10 years ago if that would be possible, I would have laughed at you, laughed. And we'll talk more about that. So, what's our strategy? I share this openly. It is not our strategy to do what others do, better, faster, cheaper. I have no desire to have that as a corporate strategy. Our strategy is to do what we do in a way that creates value for our member companies. And this is how. Now, before I get into these, I want to back up and just share briefly a quick story. We've gone through 2 previous merger attempts with another ISO, and both of those failed. The first one lasted a very, very short period of time. The second one went on for 20 months. And in fact, our staffs were already incorporated into a single staff structure before it fell apart. And immediately, our board formed a strategic planning task force to kind of determine what's next. And multiple things were considered, including totally disbanding the organization. And this was in the early 2000s. All the way to continuing to seek, independent of others, regional transmission organization status from FERC. The very first thing we did, and I facilitated the process, was to get our members together and say, so why would you not sign the membership agreement for the combined companies? What was it about SPP that you wouldn't let go of that organization? And through the process of that analysis over a 3-day period, these are the 5 differences that our members found so much value in that they were willing to keep that organization in place, even though the combination with another organization would cost less money. This is it. I mentioned it earlier, relationship-based. Never, ever forget the value of a relationship. And we focus on that each and every day and in every decision that we make. Member-driven. We exercise our independence. FERC Order 2000 requires us to operate independent of undue influence from any single market participant or group of like-minded market participants. Well, here's how we do that. We do that by putting all the diverse members around the table and hashing issues out around tables like this prior to ever submitting anything to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission for their consideration. Some of my counterparts, CEOs of other organizations, say, well, Nick, it takes you forever to reach consensus on things. And I just shake my head and disagree, because the issue is they don't implement things any faster from idea to implementation than we do. We spend our time around our tables. They spend their time in front of an administrative law judge at 888 First Street Northeast in Washington, D.C. And it's their attorneys that are battling out the rules of the road for interconnected operation as opposed to their subject matter experts. Evolution versus revolution. We take our time, obviously with a very diverse membership and a very diverse footprint. Trying to make quick decisions is just ludicrous. It's not going to happen. And then I already mentioned reliability and economics are inseparable. All of our market rules are for one purpose. How do we promote, maintain, and promote reliable and efficient operation of the bulk network? Here's the heart and soul of the organization. It's all of our working groups. Meetings are us. You can hit our website at any time and find a plethora of organizational group meetings across our footprint, bringing together subject matter experts from all of our member companies. And I will tell you, the head of that is the board of directors, who is required by our bylaws to meet with our members committee. Mike Risen is your representative on that members committee. I told your board yesterday morning, you should be proud of how well he represents your interests. There are a lot of people from our member companies who sit on that members committee, and I can assure you not all of them are respected by each other to near the degree that Mike is respected by that group. I'm not kidding, and I just believe it's important that you know that he is representing your interests very, very well. So this is how we exercise our independence of undue influence. We put all the diverse opinions at the table through these groups, and they drive the decisions. So I'll hurry through some of these. You know most of these numbers, the generating capacity in our footprint, mostly gas now. Coal is second, wind is third. 10 years ago, gas and coal would have been swapped. Obviously, you understand the history behind that. And then here's the energy story. Coal, 47.5%, nearly 50% coal. You all need to be proud of that. Obviously, you all are a large contributor to that. Natural gas at 20%, and right behind that, wind at 17%. Phenomenal numbers. So here's the wind story. We're approaching 18,000 megawatts of wind in the footprint. 177 different interconnection points for us. And I asked our staff last month, and I thought of this question as I was flying over part of our footprint and seeing wind turbines as far as I could see in western Kansas and, in western Oklahoma. And so I asked the question, how many turbines is this? 9,112 turbines as of last month. That number's probably more now. So how are we able to do that? And obviously we're in the Saudi Arabia of wind in the U.S., but how are we able to accommodate that much wind? In my reasoning, there are three things that happened, not because of wind, but happened because of any number of strategic initiatives. The first is we built $10 billion worth of transmission infrastructure for a lot of different reasons, but also because many of our members were designating wind as a network resource to serve their load. We would not have been able to build $10 billion worth of transmission infrastructure without agreeing on how to allocate the cost for that. So I go back to the earlier point. In 2010, when we reached agreement among all the diverse participants and states on how to allocate the cost on a regional basis for that transmission, that enabled us to accommodate what we have so far. But we could have built all that and still could not manage that magnitude of wind. The consolidation of balancing authorities enables us to manage up to 50%, more than 50% penetration of wind in the footprint. If we still had 23 individual balancing authorities, there's no way that could happen. And then with the integrated marketplace and the day-ahead unit commitment to ensure reliable operation, again, there's no way we would be able to set those kinds of records. So strategically, three things, quite frankly, each driven by different motivations, but combined, they have enabled us to reliably operate with that amount of wind in the footprint. Solar's next, looking in the future. It's the cheapest central station form of generation today. You can look at the numbers that EPRI, the Electric Power Research Institute, has calculated. It's coming. It's coming. We talked about Mountain West, and I'm very excited that over the next month we will be debating the requests that the Mountain West Transmission Group have made of us for changes in how we operate today. Some of those are very unique, and they will be debated by two different groups. One, our Strategic Planning Committee, that is comprised of a combination of stakeholder representatives and board members. Another portion of those requests that deal with our governing documents will be debated by our Corporate Governance Committee, again comprised of a few board members, myself being one, and several of our stakeholder representatives. I feel very confident that we will be able to reach agreement on those. I will tell you some of those are going to stretch our thinking in terms of how we have operated in the past. But we will have good dialogue, and my hats off to the Mountain West Transmission Group for putting those issues on the table for our consideration. This will add tremendous value to our current members and certainly add tremendous value to the Mountain West Transmission Group participants. So, what's next? When I look in my crystal ball, I see any number of things that are going to be quite challenging to the industry. There's a book that was recently published, and I mean very recently, like 2 months ago. And in it, the author, Craig Roach, who has served our organization for about 13 years in advising our market monitoring unit and our board on market design and market operation issues. His book is titled Simply Electrifying. And there's a subtitle, and I'm not here to promote Craig's book, but he really made me think about the future. And if you're a historian, I can't recommend the book more highly, because he goes way back to Benjamin Franklin, to Elon, all the way up to Elon Musk, in terms of how we got to where we are today. So if you're a historian, you'll love it. But he also looks into the future. So we annually poll our members for input on what we can do better. And in a recent polling of our members committee, we got kind of conflicting information. Some of our members said, it's great, you're listening to your members, you're doing the things we want you to do, keep it up. And there was one comment that I found a little bit interesting. It's, well, you're not moving fast enough, you need to move faster. The stakeholder-driven process for strategic planning isn't being strategic enough, it's being too tactical. The board needs to, make tougher decisions and needs to, look into the future and drive the organization in a particular direction to ready us for the future. So, in listening to that and reading it and not knowing who it came from, again, anonymous information, when I was thinking about preparing for visiting with you and looking into the crystal ball, I thought, oh, yeah, okay, we need to look 10 years into the future and be more strategic in our thinking. Now, I've just shared with you our history, wonderful history and huge successes. I mean, a benefit to cost ratio approaching 12 to 1, certainly greater than 11 to 1, and all the things that have occurred. So I thought, well, 10 years into the future from this point, how well would we have done if we had changed our strategic planning process back in 2007? Seems like a fair question. So I started looking back at what we were thinking in 2007. So, gas prices in 2007, annual average for all of 2007, $8 a million BTU. $8 a million BTU. The expectations 10 years into the future by the Energy Information Administration, the government, was anywhere from, depending on who you asked, $15 to $20 a million BTU in 2017. In 2008, the spot market peaked at more than $13 a million BTU. And everybody was saying we're going to run out of natural gas. Okay, that's 1 year later from 2008. In 2009, the average annualized rate for natural gas in the SPP footprint at that point in time, all our parts of 8 states, was $3.25. And that's from our annual State of the Market report. In 2012, 5 years ago, the spot price was less than $1.80 a million BTU. Now I'm here to tell you in 2007, let's just assume that SPP's Strategic Planning Committee functioned differently. Let's just say they turned it over to our board of directors. I don't think my job would have been very safe if I had come up to them and forecast in 2007 that in 2017 we would have gas in the 250 to 325 a million BTU range long term. I mean, even in the wildest push the envelope scenario, nobody would have thought I was sane if I had projected that. And yet here we are 10 years later with that as reality. So let's look at another situation, wind. In 2007, we weren't even forecasting wind 10 years into the future. We didn't start doing that until 2009. And our 10-year forecast, so for 2017, or excuse me, in 09 for 2019, our estimate was for 2,600 megawatts of wind, 2,600 megawatts. And I already told you we're approaching 18,000. Now, again, I'm here to tell you, if anyone on our board thought that they could look in the crystal ball and even postulate that we would approach that magnitude of wind in the footprint, we would have been laughed out of the room. We would have lost all our credibility. So let's continue on. Financial transmission rights market. Carl Monroe, our Chief Operating Officer, is very familiar with this. But for years, our states absolutely had an attitude of no transition to the full day-ahead market, and certainly if you do, you better forget implementing a financial transmission rights market. And yet, here we are. And the transparency of the cost of congestion that market brings to the table, that a physical rights model left hidden, has been tremendous in terms of knowing how to combat that congestion in and with our transmission planning process. But I'm here to tell you, speaking in front of groups like this in 2007, if I was asked the question, will SPP move to a financial transmission rights market, I would have said absolutely not. Was not even on the radar screen. And yet, here we are. Coal. It was sub $2 a million BTU in our footprint. Coal was king, and it was expected to stay that way into perpetuity. So, I'm here to tell you, I don't care what our strategic planning process looked like 10 years ago and who was leading it. Nobody predicted any of these 4 things to happen. Not even in the most robust, out-of-the-box thinking, stretch-the-envelope scenario. Nobody contemplated that, and yet here we are. So just 2 years back, electric vehicles were kind of, they're out there, but nobody really saw them doing anything because the energy density of electric vehicles didn't approach a gasoline internal combustion vehicle with a full tank of gas. We have that today. 2 years ago, it was not even contemplated as in the near-term future. 2 years ago, the prediction was that there should be 40 models, all electric vehicles, between 2030 and 2035. You all know the news. This year, the announcements by Volvo, VW, GM, Ford, decisions made by China and India. Now we will have more than 50 models of all-electric cars by 2020. 2 years. That's the rapid pace of change of things. So back to Craig Roach's book. In his last chapter, he looks in the crystal ball, as I have done, and he says, well, you know, what should we be looking at? And so he takes one example. Well, if you're the richest man in the world, Bill Gates, well, you know, what are they thinking? Where are those folks putting their money? And he offers four things, and you all should be excited about these. Carbon engineering for capture. Carbon engineering for full capture. He is investing significant amount of money in R&D and believes that coal can be a significant energy source for us in the future. This is Bill Gates. Here's, and I should have said this to begin with, here's his deal. Before he will invest in anything, it has to have zero carbon emissions, zero carbon emissions. It's got to cost less than fossil fuels, and obviously less than coal and gas today. So he obviously believes that's possible. And third, it's got to be reliable around the clock. So obviously wind in its current form doesn't meet that. And let me share with you something I shared with the board yesterday. We've got 17,000 megawatts of wind in our footprint, sure. And guess what? There have been periods of time, significant periods of time, that more than 50% of the energy in the footprint is being produced by wind. On peak this year, on peak, we had 175 megawatts of wind. So wind clearly is not the answer from a robust, reliable operational perspective. So a few other things that Bill Gates is investing in. Talked about carbon engineering for capture, solar chemical technologies. The idea here is artificial photosynthesis to produce hydrogen fuel from water. That's not really new, but this is the richest man in the world and where he's spending his money. Nuclear. Who would have thought that? But it meets all his criteria. Available around the clock, but certainly it's not cheaper today than the fossil fuels, but obviously he believes that we're capable of achieving that through a new form of reactor. So those are a few of the things he's looking at. So in ending, I'm often asked when I speak in forums like this, when there's Q&A time, and I understand there's not today, but so what keeps you up at night? And there are typically two answers: cybersecurity, and I'm not going to get into that today, but that obviously is a concern for everyone because it is a vulnerability to our economy today and how we operate as a society. So be sure that your board is spending a lot of time focusing on cybersecurity. But then I'm asked, and Craig Roach postulates in his book, that there's going to be a second battle of the currents. And some of you in this room understand the battle of the currents, and some may not. But briefly and succinctly, way back at the beginning of electrification, there was a battle between AC distribution of electric energy at bulk levels and DC. So on the AC side, you had Westinghouse and Tesla supporting him, and then Thomas Edison on the DC side. And obviously AC won that particular battle, but today I'm not so sure we may not be going back the other direction. And quite frankly, I don't think that it's one versus the other. It's one and the other. So in the book, Craig postulates that the second battle of the currents will most likely be, his words, between the bulk electric grid and microgrids. And I will tell you, I don't agree. And people have asked me, well, gee, you're in a regional transmission organization. What if microgrids take over and there's no need for the bulk electric network anymore? And I just kind of shake my head. And I don't see that as a possible outcome. It's not one versus the other. It's one and the other. And believe you me, I am challenging our staff to look in a future where we are no longer looking at doing our job as a balancing authority by assuming that load is this random event that just does whatever it's going to do, and then we chase it with big, huge thermal machines that, quite frankly, from a physical perspective, don't like to be moved. They like to be set at a certain level and left alone. So here's my view. No different than the battle of the currents where one had to win and one had to lose, and they don't. In my view here, it's not going to be one versus the other. It's going to be one and the other. And here's the primary reason for my conclusion on that. In my earlier career, I worked a great deal on the IT side of the shop and dealing with computers. And I was a part of the early debate on mainframe versus PCs. Mainframe, large grid, PCs, independent and standalone. What's the value of a PC today but for its ability to network with other PCs? Not much. And I left my phone down there, but what's the value of that phone but for its ability to network with other phones and other devices? It's not much. So I leave you with my view. Yes, we're going to be focused on the distribution side of the equation and microgrids and distributed generation. My electric car, I very much envision in the future will be controlled by a signal that very well could come from Southwest Power Pool on when to charge and when not to charge when I have it plugged in my garage. That's load control. And do I care? I don't care. As long as I wake up and my car's charged, I don't care what it did any time of the period during the evening. I just don't care. What if it discharges back into the distribution network and I'm paid a service for regulation? Do I care? I don't care. I really don't. I think prices are going to ultimately end up at devices. And the consumer's going to be, other than just deciding what that strategy is to meet their overall needs, it's just going to happen. And utilities are embracing this. I've challenged our engineers to think about a generation interconnection agreement that's not a physical location and a physical plant, but what if it's virtual generation that is the combination of thousands or tens of thousands of distributed energy resources, and we're controlling when that load is there, when that load is not there, and potentially when that load can in fact insert energy back into the network. The Integrated Electric Network, the Electric Power Research Institute, has shared its new vision. And I call your attention to that document and that group of work, because CEOs from all over the world have worked for nearly 2 years in putting that together. And it talks about the integrated energy network, not the electric network. Obviously, electrification is their primary focus. But I'm here to tell you it's going to be a whole new world. And your board's going to have to really think strategically. I was glad to hear that you've got that opportunity in the next day or so. It's an exciting time. You know, when people ask me if I fear, you know, distributed generation, I just don't. I look at it as one of the most tremendous opportunities to interconnect better with our end-use customers than we ever have. They're going to become part of us. They are going to be enabled to make different decisions than they've ever been able to make in the past, and they're going to be dependent upon their utility to help guide the electrification of their homes. Electrification is going to get more and more and more. You know, load may be dropping right now because of efficiency, but as these technologies continue to develop and the electrification of all of our transportation continues to take off, and I promise you it will, it's just going to be an amazing time. So again, thank you for the honor of visiting with you today. I really enjoyed visiting with the board yesterday morning. I look forward to visiting with any of you during the break, and you can always reach me or any one of our staff. In addition to the Basin staff, they certainly represent your interests in our groups, so you may reach out to them to get to us, but you can hit our website, very simple, spp.org, and you can get in contact with me directly or others. So again, I look forward to continued engagement. Thank you for your membership in Southwest Power Pool, and again, thank you for the honor of being with you today. I hope I've spurred a little bit of different thinking. Have a great morning.